just for me to get a sense of this whole thing, how many of you have been with Wipro for more than 20 years? 20 years plus. When I...
One stint, two stints.
Two stints.
Across two stints, me.
Yeah, across two stints is fine, right? So only Santosh. Yeah. When I was very surprised that when I asked this question in Jefferson City, there were lots of hands. Huh? I mean, when I say lots, I don't mean 25 hands, but there were enough hands to sort of surprise me. You remember that, right? So, so 20 years, just Santosh. Let's say 10 to 20 years. Just keep your hands up, right? One. Okay, fine. Most of the guys I know actually. Okay, all right. 10 to 20 years. Now, how many more than 5 years? 5 to 10 years. Okay. So this is a pretty tenured crowd. I mean, this is. And how many of you have been around in Wipro for, let's say, less than 2 years? Okay, great. All right, fantastic. What happened?
He was saying between 2 to 5 years.
Okay, fine. So there's a lot of Wipro experience in this room, right? I mean, it may not be more than 20 years, but it's still a lot of Wipro experience. So therefore, you have no justification if you are going to fail in my quiz. Right? Absolutely no justification. Because in other places, like I did this in Boston or wherever, like I was doing it in Tampa. Right? I mean, Tampa, everybody is 2 years and less. Right? So here there's no justification. Okay. So we'll do a bit of a quizzing. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So who's younger? HP or Wipro? HP or Wipro? HP is younger. Okay. You guys get out. My God.
Wipro was founded in 1965. 45.
And when was HP born?
72 years.
Like, Kapil, get out of the room, please. What the hell is this, man?
Sorry.
I mean, this is hard. Really hard.
Trick question.
Okay, of course it's a trick question, but with 20 years in Wipro, you should get it. Okay, so it is a trick question. So all of you are wrong. HP is older than Wipro. The trick, of course, is that he's older just by August, September, October, November, December, just by 5 months. So HP was born on 24th of July, 1945, and Wipro was born, when is the company born? The company is born when you have the certificate of incorporation, right? The registration. So, I can hold him to account if he doesn't know specifically. Right? Do you know? What is the date? The date, do you remember? It's 29th of December 1945. Okay? So if you go to the Wipro certificate of incorporation, the company was incorporated on 29th December 1945. Right? Now the question, second question, right? Don't be hesitant if you don't know the answers, huh? Because I've already pulled your leg saying you guys are so tenured, don't know, right? So second question, what is the business we started with? My God, this is terrible, man. Absolutely terrible. No, are.
Now I don't think so bad. Not so bad.
This is a limit, man. Okay, this is like spinning. Okay, so no. We did not start with vanaspati or vegetable oil, as otherwise it is known as. Okay, we did not start with that. I heard somebody say the right answer. I just sort of in an undertone, as though she or he was absolutely wrong, but she was right, huh? Sorry? No, that's a very creative guess. If not vegetable oil, palm oil. A very creative guess.
Rice.
None, huh? Rice. Have you heard this whole thing before?
No.
No, you're not. So where do you read this?
I have a birdie that tells me.
What were we doing with rice?
That I don't know. Besides growing your bread. I don't know.
No, we were not growing rice. We were actually not growing rice. So the business that we, yes.
I actually think I
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think I may have heard it from a presentation that was held by someone in this room, and I won't say. We were trading rice in Burma.
Yeah. So so I've done this before. Not with this crowd.
I did the presentation for the Global 100.
Huh?
She organized the Global 100 presentation.
Okay. Oh, in Dallas?
Yes.
Oh, you were in Dallas?
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay.
Yes, in July.
Yeah, in
And then
July.
Cap was there, and he gave the presentation. So
But isn't this is unbelievable? This guy sees me doing this like 30 times a year, and he still responds to my question. This is amazing. So, yeah, a good student. Sir, I got the answer. Okay, so, well, we started by trading rice. And it's not very clear as to why was it that we were trading rice from Burma into India. Because India is, as all of you know, heavily rice growing, but we were trading rice from Burma into India. In fact, interestingly, anybody from Calcutta? You're from Calcutta? So one of the earliest, in fact, the first office that Wipro had was on Chaurangi, right? I forget the building's name. Even now it is there. Huh?
Pretoria Street.
No, not Pretoria Street. Pretoria Street is much later. I'm talking about the days of the rice trading and stuff like that, right? So Pretoria Street is when infotech and technology were there. So Pretoria Street is much later. So we started rice trading, and and then do you know this? So I'm just sort of going on telling you guys interesting things. Is that okay? It's not necessary that I'm talking about Wipro Science Education Fellowship. I'm leading up to that in a manner. Okay. So do you know this very fascinating bit of our history that in 1947, 47 is important for us for two reasons. 47 is when we got listed. We got listed in 47 in the Bombay Stock Exchange. And there's another interesting side story which very few people are familiar with, which is this, that what happened in 1947, which was far more important for the country, for India, than, of course, Wipro's stock listing. Of course, independent. I mean, that much you know. So, India became independent, and partition happened. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah, for my colleagues who may not be familiar, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was, let's say, he's the founder of Pakistan. So when India and Pakistan were divided, he was the person who was the leader of Pakistan. So actually Jinnah invited Hashim Premji, the founder of our company, and Mr. Premji's father, to become the first Minister of Finance for Pakistan. Right? And he refused to go. And he refused to go, much like millions of other Muslims, because they didn't see Pakistan as their home. They saw India as their home. And he said, look, my country is India, this is where I'll remain. But that is quite an extraordinary thing, to be offered to become the Minister of Finance, the first Minister of Finance while you're founding a country, and for this man to refuse it, right, was quite extraordinary. And had he not refused it, had he gone and become the Minister of Finance, then none of us would have been here, because Wipro certainly would not have been what it eventually became, right? So, an interesting sidelight to that story. But, so let's cut to 1966. Why is 66 important in our history?
Mr. Premji took over, right?
Huh?
Mr. Premji took over.
Yeah, right? Everybody's familiar. Yeah? I mean, I'm not seeing any shake of head like this, whichever.
Don't take a risk of it.
Okay. Yeah, so 1966 is when Hashim Premji, who had founded the company, he passed away, right? And when he passed away, he was 49 years old, and AHP was studying electrical engineering in Stanford, and he had to sort of leave his studies in between without finishing the degree at that point in time, come back to India to run the business, right? And he was barely 21, so very young man, very small business, right? Nobody else to run the business really, and therefore he came back to India to run this business. Now, I guess the first 5-6 years were sort of very formative for him in the sense of his sort of coming to terms with his personal loss, taking over a business, right? I think the most important event in that particular period was he says this story, and that he went into, by then Wipro, while it was a very small company, it was already a listed company, right? So he had shareholders. So he had he went into his sort of first or second annual general meeting, and there was a shareholder at the back, and he said something to Mr. Premji. And you imagine this, that this is a very young man who has no experience, has been called back, his dad has passed away, who built the company. So he goes into the shareholder meeting, and there's a shareholder who's a pretty experienced person. He sort of stands up and he says, "Look, I want to tell you something." He said, "What?" So he said, "Look, I think that and this is the word that I've heard from him, that if a twit like you is going to run this company, then the company can only be run to the ground, right?" So Mr. Premji has said this to me, that for the next 5-6 years, his only objective in life was to prove that guy wrong, right? And he did, and so it's not as if the company lost money, it's not as if the company folded up. He kept going at it, and eventually the company stabilized, started growing, and so on and so forth. But that's been, I think, one of the defining sort of events in his life, right? Now, have you heard of the story before? No? Not really? Yeah, okay. So that was really the defining event, because if you think of this young man, he could have gone anywhere, but he said, "Look, I'm going to prove this guy wrong," and he did. Now, let's take the first 5-6 years out. So we'll cut to 71-72, and I'll talk about the decade, the 70s decade, 71 to 80, which really has shaped Wipro. Eventually, Wipro became, or Wipro is today, because of what happened in those 10 years, right? And those 10 years basically have 3 narrative trajectories, 3 big stories. Take a risk. What are those 3 big stories? 3 narratives. Yeah? Okay, I'll tell you. So, the first narrative, and the first narrative is a fascinating thing, and fascinating for people like us here. Because the fascinating thing about the first narrative is that with that small family business, which was based in which place? Full marks. So it was based in a place called Amalner. Amalner in Maharashtra, roughly 350 kilometers, 400 kilometers east of Bombay, right? So it was a very small business, and there were hundreds of small family businesses like that, right? Hundreds of them. And it's not just in Maharashtra, anywhere. In New Jersey, I'm sure you would have hundreds of family businesses like that. So it was one family business like that. That is all it was. So the first narrative trajectory of Wipro in those 10 years, which eventually shaped us and made us what we are today, the first narrative trajectory was Mr. Premji decided to professionalize the company, right? we're all professionals. We are here. This is not a family-owned, family-run business, right? Now, it's a very curious thing. Why did he want to professionalize such a small company, right? Why did he want to professionalize? But he wanted to professionalize, right? And he narrates the story with a lot of enjoyment himself. That when he decided to professionalize, he wanted to recruit people from IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Calcutta. And just imagine some small business which works in Amalner, vegetable oil, this 24-year-old kid, he shows up in IIM Ahmedabad or IIM Calcutta, they don't even let him in, right? So he just sort of kept persisting to recruit professional managers, qualified professional managers. I met the first qualified professional manager that he hired. He was an MBA from IIM Calcutta, right? So he's the first professional manager that Mr. Premji hired, and his story is fascinating. He told me that Mr. Premji was persistent, and he was in Calcutta. This guy was in Calcutta. And he was persistent, and he wanted to interview him. So this guy, his name is Ravi Ladmi, his parents were in Bombay. So Mr. Premji said, I'll give you an air ticket to fly from Calcutta to Bombay, get interviewed, and you can go back. Ravi said, well, I have no interest in this company, but this guy is giving me a free air ticket, so I might as well take it up and go and meet my parents. So he lands up in Bombay, and his appointment is in the morning at 8:30 a.m. or something next morning for the interview, and he shows up. And when he shows up, he's given 9 case studies, right? And he's told, read all these 9 case studies. After that, your interview will happen. And apparently, he was interviewed from 8:30 in the morning till 9 p.m. in the night by HP. And then they finished, and he said, well, I'll drop you to your place. So he took him in his car, dropped him on the way, grilled him again, right? When he dropped him, he said, tomorrow morning, come back at 8:30. I'm still not done. So he came back again at 8:30 in the morning and went on for another 2.5, 3 hours and went back. And he's narrated this to us. He says, look, I had absolutely no intention. Why would an IIM Calcutta graduate join this silly vegetable oil company, right? But I was so taken up by this man, this young man. What was this guy, right? How can he interview somebody for 1.5 days, right? And I mean, in that same unrelenting, excruciating detail style that, at least some of us are very familiar with, right? So he just went on and on. So Ravi, he apparently said, look, I have got an MBA from IIM Calcutta. I can join any company in this country, but where will I get an opportunity to discover what is this man, right? So that's how he ended up joining Wipro. So he was the first professional hire that Wipro had. Well, after that, he kept hiring more and more professional managers, and that powered what I would say is the second narrative trajectory of Wipro. So the first narrative trajectory of Wipro was professionalizing the management. The second one was diversification. So, we had rice trading. By the time Mr. Premji took over, we had already got into vegetable oil, which means Hashim Premji had got into vegetable oil. So Mr. Premji expanded the business into soaps. And the soap was sort of a natural expansion because, the extract of the vegetable oil process could be used for soap making, right? So therefore, the soap was a natural extension. Then he expanded into precision hydraulics. The precision hydraulic business is a fairly big business. In fact, facilities in the US now. And then, of course, famously in 1979, 80, we expanded into IT, right? Now, how many of you know how did we expand into IT? Why did we diversify into IT? So that's my.
Change of government in India, IBM was asked to move out of the country.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Good. How many years in Wipro?
Manufacturing place in Mysore. That's the place we started using it for manufacturing.
Yeah. So this is what happened. There are 2 parts to the story. The first part everybody is familiar with. The second part, which is what you talked about, is more familiar to people. The first part is that by 78, Mr. Premji had sort of recruited a bunch of really smart professional managers. And he wanted to make the next big diversification, right? And all of you are so young that you won't remember this. Those of you who have been and who lived in India, and those of you who have not lived in India, don't know India, would not know this at all. But do you remember, or you must have heard it from your parents, if you have, which is if you wanted to buy a scooter, you heard this.
Yeah, I knew I was not sure on that there was a project he was thinking whether he should invest in the manufacturing company or should go in IT.
So, those of you who are familiar with this story, you're familiar that if you wanted to buy a scooter in 1979, you'll pay the money in 79 and you'll get the scooter in 83, right? So, I'm not waitlist 3 years, 4 years. You have some kind of a hierarchy. If you wanted a Bajaj, you'll wait 7 years, Chetak. And you were happy with Chetak, right? And if you're happy with what is the other one?
Supreme.
Something, then you can get in 3 years' time. So you want the bad one, 3 years. You want the good one, you wait 7 years. So you're absolutely right. So they had worked on a detailed project to actually set up a business in manufacturing two-wheelers, scooters actually, right? And what happened was that it was apparently a very robust plan, but what really happened was that it required a huge amount of capital investment, naturally so, right? I mean, a manufacturing facility of that size. And Wipro was too small a company to be able to raise that kind of capital. So eventually, it sort of petered out. It didn't work out. And as this, shall I say, this realization was seeping in that the scooter project is not going to happen, is when the Janata government took over. They kicked out IBM. They kicked out Coke, and they kicked out this and that. And then we saw an opportunity in trying to service the IBM mainframes that were left behind. In fact, famously, the IBM mainframe that was there in the Indian Institute of Science. Right? So in fact, if you go to Indian Institute of Science and if you say you're a Wipro person, the Indian Institute of Science people have a great pride in Wipro. They're saying you are our child. Okay, because it's true, because we in some senses started our IT stuff actually in the Indian Institute of Science, right? So that's how we actually got into IT, right? And of course, then the rest of it is sort of history. We went into IT, we did a fabulous job of many things. Those of you who are, let's say Santosh will remember this for sure. Wipro was I'm talking about those days, 80s, 90s. We were a real tech company. In a sense, and if you guys, a lot of you will be working in those areas, so don't think of what I'm going to say as a sign of disrespect. Huh? I'm talking about the reality at that point in time. Enterprise-related work we used to look down upon. It is real tech work. Are we designing the chips? Are we designing the telecom equipment? That's what our core strength was. So that's how we got into IT. So first narrative trajectory is professionalization. Second narrative trajectory is that of diversification. Third, and which all of you are very familiar with, the third, which all of you are very familiar with, is that when Mr. Premji sort of started running the business, one thing that he said to himself is, look, I don't care much whether I'm successful in business or not. I will not compromise on integrity, right? Now, most of you who are familiar with India of today and are familiar with India of 40 years ago know that to run a business, a private business in India, without bribing, without accepting bribes, without letting people bribe, without letting people take bribes, was unthinkable, right? Absolutely unthinkable at that point in time. And for a young man to say that and then to actually make it happen, right, was quite remarkable. I was in engineering college. So in the mid 80s, I was in engineering college. And the reason I joined Wipro is because my family was all of it was in the public, they were all government servants, right, one way or the other. Right? In my family, the idea of joining the private sector was absolute taboo, because private sector meant that you have to go and bribe, right? So when I was in engineering college, I somehow heard of this strange company called Wipro, and the reason we found it strange was because our own seniors were working there, because they joined a year or 2 years before, and they said, look, this is a very strange place. Here, you're absolutely crystal clear. If somebody's asking you for a 5,000 rupee bribe, you don't bribe, even if you're losing a 5 million rupee order. You just don't do it. Finished. And there's no ambiguity at all. And that was unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable. So Mr. Premji's commitment to himself that, well, I will build this business, success is later, but integrity comes first, was truly remarkable. And in fact, while the basic commitment was remarkable, also what was interesting was that he actually sat and wrote down the Wipro values for the first time. Which year? Would you know that? 1972. So what we call Spirit of Wipro today, it was called the Wipro values at that point in time, right? And today it seems a very ordinary thing that every company has values which they have written down. But if you go back to 1972 in India, you won't find that. From whatever research we have done, we were the first company to actually sit down and write values, and we said, look, these are the values that you hold us to. Our behavior, your behavior, we'll test everything by these values, right? So that's the third narrative trajectory, right? So professionalizing, diversifying, and values, right? A foundation of values, right? Now, there's a particular kind of an aspect that I have not talked about, and which is what will lead us to the Wipro Science Education Fellowship and all the foundation and stuff like that, right? And that is that, when Mr. Premji was actually in Stanford and studying, and when he was circumstances forced him back to India to run the business, his notion of his future life was not that of a business person, right? He did not see himself as a business person at all. What he wanted to do was he wanted to somehow work for an organization which worked in the social sector, right? The examples that I think he was not very clear, but maybe the Ford Foundation, maybe the World Health Organization, something like that, right? He had no idea that he will go and work in the business. He wanted to work to somehow contribute to society. That's all, right? Now, the thing is that was so deep set in him that it never went away. This whole notion that he runs a business and he became enormously successful, Wipro became successful, it made him enormously wealthy, that's all great. But his intent was that how does he contribute towards a better world in whatever little way he can, right? So, that sort of stayed with him. And in fact, if you have a town hall and if you ask him what is his regret, what are his regrets, he will list this one that I'm going to tell you as the first regret. For example, his first regret is that, through the 70s up to the late 90s, he was so involved with Wipro that he did not give systematic thought to his desire that how does he contribute to society. So it's only in the late 90s that he started thinking about it. And that issue, and by then, if you go back to 99, and by 99 some of you were around, right? You remember that he was the second most wealthiest person in the world, and and so on and so forth. And Wipro was, of course, highly successful. And so he said, well, I'm quite clear, this wealth that I have, I don't see this as mine. I don't see myself as the owner of this wealth. I want to give it away to social causes, right? That's what he said. And therefore, he set up the Azim Premji Foundation in 2001, and I'll talk about the Azim Premji Foundation in a bit, right? And he started gifting the ownership of Wipro to the foundation. So over the past 15 odd years now, he has gifted 40% of the ownership of Wipro to the Azim Premji Foundation, right? So it's a pretty simple relationship. Now, at this moment, the Azim Premji Foundation is actually the largest shareholder of Wipro, the company. And therefore, Wipro is a very unusual company in that for every dollar that Wipro earns, a very substantial portion of it goes straight away to social philanthropic causes. There are not many companies of this nature in this world, right? What's happened is that while Mr. Premji gifted 40% to us, to the foundation, we have done a little bit of, shall I say, portfolio management, and we have sold off 7% of the Wipro stock holding. We still own 33%. 7% that we sold off, we have invested into other things, right? But with 33%, it's still the same, which is 33 cents to $1 actually goes towards philanthropic and social causes, right? So, that's just normal portfolio management because, eventually the endowment, so Mr. Premji's gift to us, which is roughly about $15-16 billion, which makes us one of the largest foundations in the world, we operate from the return on the endowment. So therefore, like any endowment, so you look at the Harvard endowment or you look at any endowment, that's portfolio managed, right? So that's what we do. Now, while this Mr. Premji's desire to contribute to society, on one hand, led to saying that his personal wealth he will give away. On the other hand, it also led to this idea that, Wipro, while its responsibility is to grow revenues, to grow profits, to gain market share, at the same point in time, Wipro must contribute back to communities that it operates in. So these are two separate things. One is Mr. Premji's personal contribution, and the second is the company must contribute to the community that operates in, right? And that is actually what led eventually, again, I will go back about roughly 20 years, to setting up the school education program in India, where Wipro was supporting multiple not-for-profits to help improve schools in India, right? And that, of course, that program has grown substantially, and it continues to do well. The thing is this, that why do we do it? Why do we do it, right? Why we do it is because our belief is that if you are a part of this world, let's say we are here in New Jersey here, you are a citizen of this place. We are a citizen of this place. And therefore, like an engaged citizen, we should contribute. There's no big deal, right? And no further reason to trigger such action. That you're a part of this community, we must contribute. So that's how the school education program in India got sort of built, right? Now, there's another thing that happened at that point in time. So after the school education program in India was built, employees started coming and asking us that, well, the company is doing so much for school education, how can we contribute, right? Now, the problem with that program in India was that that program is a very technical program. When I say technical, Wipro is supporting education organizations that were working on, let's say, teacher capacity development, or working on assessment reform, or working on curriculum improvement, or something like that. Not, IT professionals can't do that. That requires deep expertise in education, right? So when employees came to us and said, what do? We had no opportunity, which is what really led to the setting up and the expansion of the Wipro Cares system, right? So Wipro Cares basically became a platform where employees contribute their time or their money. The money is matched by Wipro one-to-one, and then that contribution goes to local communities in various ways, either health issues or educational issues or environmental issues, right? So Wipro Cares is very vibrant across multiple locations. Of course, Wipro Cares is a very employee-driven thing, meaning it's not as though there's a central office which says, we'll run these programs. Whichever offices, whichever Wipro communities, there are employees who are willing to take leadership. Then they take leadership, they form a local Wipro Cares chapter, and things start, right? So, let's say if you go back to India, I think Cochin is doing a fabulous job, Pune is doing a fabulous job, because there are a lot of people who are engaged there. I think Curitiba, a lot of stuff happens. I think Philippines, lots of stuff happens. Romania, lots of stuff is happening. So it depends on, but Wipro Cares was a platform that was developed for community contribution because employees wanted to contribute. So there were two things then, right? Which is the school education program and Wipro Cares, right? Now, what happened is that about 7 years ago, and Santosh enters the story here. He could have entered very many years ago, but he has a specific role now here. That it occurred to us that this is crazy. That if Wipro thinks that we should contribute to our communities, right? Then why is it that we're not doing anything in the US? We are a global company. 45% of, I don't know how much of our revenues come from here, from the North America. 50% North America. So if 50% of our revenues are coming from North America, why aren't we doing something here, right? So I basically came to Santosh and said, look, let's do something, right? So, we worked together and we basically figured out a partnership with UMass Boston, right? And, like many things in life, this is a series of accidents. How we came across UMass Boston, how we met Professor Arthur Eisencraft, and we said, well, look, we are clear that when we work towards community contribution in the US, we will work on school education because that's our area. We don't want to do too many things. We want to focus on one specific thing. The question was, how do we do it? Oh my God, that's dangerous. So shall I ask him the same quiz questions? What, Rajan?
Sorry.
What is the date? What is the date of the incorporation of Wipro?
It was 6 months before India's independence and 6 months after AHP was born.
He's pretty good, man. Pretty good because I've asked him before.
I correlated two different data points.
Okay. No, it's 29th of December 1945. So you're right about the AHP stuff, but not about the independence. Okay.
So one question. Why only primary education?
No, so I'll come to that. Actually, let me take this. So it's his question is why only primary education, right? So it's not only primary education; it's K through 12 actually. So all of school education.
Primary means the down education from.
Yeah. So okay, let me come back to it. Let me just finish this part of the story. So then what happened was that we ran across this Arthur Eisencraft, who was a distinguished professor of science education at UMass Boston. He really is an expert. If US Congress has a hearing on science education, or the Senate wants to hear something, then they invite Arthur Eisencraft, and we met him. And what we did is, we said, well, since we want to work with schools and school teachers, why don't you set up a program in Boston? So what he did was, he had done something of similar nature before. He basically set up a program for public school teachers, STEM teachers, to help them become better teachers. And that was a 2-year fellowship where the teachers commit 250 hours of professional development time to the program. And Arthur and his team runs the program. And these are K through 12 teachers, across STEM subjects. And the design of the program was to basically enhance their capabilities to teach STEM subjects in the classroom. But that was only one part of the program. The other part of the program was that the school districts that were nominating those teachers, the school districts were committing that they will use these school teachers to help the school districts improve the capacities of other teachers in the same subject. So there's a 2-level impact, right? The teacher herself, and then the teacher going out in the school district and helping other teachers, right? Now, we did this for like a year and a half, and what we saw was actually going well. Since it was going very well, then we, then I asked Santosh that where should we expand? Because, where should we expand has a relationship with where are we present really, right? So Santosh said that could we expand in New York and New Jersey? This area basically, right? So now that was a very important transition point, because Arthur and UMass Boston had run that program in Boston. They had no idea how to run it in New Jersey or in New York. So then what happened was that we designed a model where, while UMass Boston remains our lead partner, however, we would partner with a local institution to run the program. So the curriculum is that of UMass Boston. Arthur Eisencraft directs it. However, on the ground, a local institution runs it. And that's how we ended up partnering with Montclair State University here. And Montclair State University then chose 5 school districts, offered the same fellowship, 2-year fellowship to public school teachers. And by the way, those school districts are not school districts which serve wealthy communities, right? These are all school districts which are specifically chosen because they're primarily serving disadvantaged communities, right? So we started with Montclair State University here, and Mercy College in a sort of, what is the place called, Santosh? Somewhere on Hudson, up Ossining.
Ferry. The ferry.
Somewhere up on Hudson. So we partnered with them, and then we expanded the program in New Jersey and New York. Dobbsbury, exactly, right? So we expanded there. And then at that point, and then we also expanded in Chicago, right? So we actually had 4 sites. We had Boston, New Jersey, New York, and Chicago, right? Now, when that happened, 2-3 other things happened. One is that we started realizing that how remarkable was it that in the United States, there was such little investment and focus on teachers. It was truly remarkable, right? So the more we went around, and the more we talked to school districts, and the more we talked to administration in Washington, we realized that there was very little investment going into teacher professional development. And therefore, there were 2 things happening. One, our model was working well, and 2, it was an area of great need. And in fact, it was an area of greater need than we had anticipated. We had not thought that this is the way it would turn out really. So we watched the program for about 4 years, and about a year and a half ago, again, in consultation with Santosh and the team, we decided now we'll expand the program. And over the past year and a half, now we've expanded the program to Tampa, to Dallas, to Jefferson City, and to San Francisco. Now, just because I've told you the detail of the program, we are now facing a next level of complexity in the program. So you can think of Arthur Eisencraft in Boston. He's directing the program across 7 sites, right? And it's a complex thing because you're talking about over 300-400 teachers, actually multiple school sites, very different locales. Jefferson City, those of you who've gone, is very rural, very complex from a logistics standpoint. New York is very different, and so on and so forth, right? So, that program, I think that we've established, which we are wanting to expand in 2 ways. We'll expand other locations. Wherever Wipro is, we'll expand a few more locations. Second, we are actually wanting to help other corporations expand it. Because how much ever we expand, let's assume in 10 years' time we expanded 25 cities, right? or 25 locations. It's not going to cover the country, right? And that area of work is in desperate need today. So what we are suggesting to different corporations, in fact, we had a chat with some Honeywell colleagues, right? That look, you can take this program and you can expand it in your locations, right? Because teachers desperately need this. So the Wipro Science Education Fellowship sort of became our flagship program to contribute to communities. But again, here in the United States, the same question occurred, which is, well, this is a great program, Wipro is really contributing to its communities, but that's not something through which employees can engage. And that's how the idea of the First Book partnership came up, right? So we tied up with First Book, and I don't know how many book donation events we have done already here itself, right? I mean, in New Jersey, every year, right? So the First Book partnership where we donate books to kids, right? Who are, who actually have no books at home at all. So we select schools which serve disadvantaged kids mostly, and then we give out books to them. And hopefully it's not just an event, but actually we continue our engagement with those schools. And I think we have done an enormous number of events of that nature. I forget the number. Now I've stopped counting. How much is it, Kapil?
We've given out now 275,000.
Okay, so 300,000 books roughly across 30, 40 locations, roughly, right? So, but that's a program in which the employees can directly engage, right? So that's what sort of Wipro does. And I'm not going to take you through to how similar stuff we do, across other countries. So let's say UK. Last week we've launched the Wipro Science Education Fellowship in UK as well, right? And we'll probably launch in other countries also. Now, I'm going to tell you one more thing about Wipro, and then I'll talk a bit about the foundation. Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. So, if you now look at Wipro, successful business, this commitment to society, the commitment to society being expressed in the form of contribution to school education and so on, and across the countries we operate in. But then in 2006, it also started occurring to us that why is it that we don't have a view in the environment? Right? Don't we think about the environment at all? Right? Don't we feel that the environment is a big issue? And that led us to a commitment that we, Wipro, will become as sustainable a company as possible. Meaning we'll cut down our carbon emissions, less electricity, and whatever electricity we use, hopefully from renewable sources. We'll cut down our water intensity, meaning we'll reuse water, and we'll use less water, right? 3, we will actually make sure that we don't send waste to land refills, so which means waste will be reused, recycled, right, and cut. And 4, which was very unusual, and I'm talking about 2006 now, 12 years ago, we will actually help regenerate biodiversity, right? So those of you who have been to, let's say, EC in the Electronic City office, in the butterfly season, you would have seen some 100,000 butterflies there, right? So you would have seen it there, now actually in Hyderabad also. So what we have done is we have converted our campuses into some kind of biodiversity spots, right? So in 2006 we started this, a systematic, deliberate approach, and actually the operations team has led on this, right? Because you guys actually lead this. You guys are the guys who cut down the energy consumption, you guys cut down the water stuff, you guys really handle the waste stuff absolutely, right? So our teams have led this. Now, we started this in 2006 systematically, right? And we were very early onto this, very, very early onto this. And therefore, we are routinely classified as the leader in sustainability across the world. You would have seen, I think Abid sent out a mail this week, right? So we're, yesterday, is it? Okay. So for the 9th consecutive year, we've been listed in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, right? And on the IT sector, globally, all these 9 years, either we've been number 1 or number 2, right? And of course, our Indian peers are nowhere near there, right? I mean, it's I think this Atos and us, just the two of us who've been there. In fact, a few years ago, and I keep repeating the story because I find it really strange. A few years ago, Newsweek listed the most sustainable companies on the planet, and they listed us as the 2nd most sustainable company in the planet. Right, and which of course is a great recognition for us, but I was horrified by the recognition, and the reason I was horrified by the recognition is because, look, I know how much we are doing, And if this is all it takes to become the second most sustainable company on the planet, then God help humanity, right? Because not much is happening. That doesn't mean that we're not doing good stuff. We are doing good stuff, but I know how much more needs to be done, right? But all that, of course, this I'll not say outside, but the fact is that we, with this commitment to the environment, we are routinely recognized as a leader in sustainability. So now if you look at Wipro, the company, you got the social stuff that we do in all the places we operate, and this deep commitment to the environment. Okay, now that's the Wipro story. I'm going to talk a bit about the foundation. Is it okay? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah? And now Rajan is here, I can keep quizzing him with some. So Rajan, when was the foundation?
Don't stretch my luck too much.
Acha, okay.
What was your question?
When was the foundation started?
When was the foundation started? This is like, this is in the prime of your youth. When it started.
I would say 2003, 2004, that time frame?
Not bad. 2001. 2001. Yeah, not bad. Yeah.
I'm sure it took me a year for
To realize. Yeah. Okay. So like I said to you guys before he came in, that in 2001 the foundation was started, and Mr. Premji started gifting away, pretty much most of his wealth. So he's given almost 60% of his wealth, not just the Wipro holding, because the Wipro he had, of course, Wipro was his primary wealth, but given that he used to own so much of Wipro and the dividends would go to him, that dividend would be invested into other securities, other investments, right, which Premji invests, his private equity arm does. So he's given a lot of that also to the foundation now, or most of it to the foundation now. So therefore, it does make the foundation, give or take one or two places, but amongst the top 5 largest foundations in the entire world, right? Now, the question is, what does the foundation do, right? Now, what the foundation does is it has 2 parts to its work. One part of its work is in education, and the other part of its work is in areas which are sort of complementary to education. Now, the work in education that we do, it's actually like an operating organization. So we are perhaps, the Azim Premji Foundation is the largest non-governmental education organization in India. So we are an operating organization. We don't give out grants. We are not like Ford Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation. We work ourselves. We've got a large team, and I'll describe it to you. The other part of our work, where we do give out grants, but it's in non-educational areas. So we give out grants to other not-for-profits, like the Gates Foundation does, or the Ford Foundation does. So that's what we do, and I'll describe that to you. Now, first on the education side. See, on the education side, we are basically set on trying to help the public, the government education system in India improve, right? And for that, how many of you, some of you have not grown up in India. Most of you have grown up in India, or at least are very familiar with India, right? How many of you have studied in a government school in India, a public school? Where?
Andhra Pradesh.
Which part?
Rayalaseema, Kadapa.
Rayalaseema, Kadapa. Yeah.
Kendra Vidyalaya.
Oh, really? You're a great guy, man. I'm also from Kendriya Vidyalaya. Which Kendriya Vidyalaya?
All across. My dad was in the army.
Okay, great. Rajan, you?
So this is like a quasi-government. So this is like a model high. It was only in Chandigarh. I don't know if this is in anywhere.
No, but model schools are there. Yeah, they might be called by different names, but model highs are there across.
In Chandigarh.
Yeah. See, the Indian public education system, or the Indian education system, is by far the most complex system in the entire world, right? One, it is huge, absolutely huge. So roughly 240 million children, right? Massive size. Second, all of you are familiar the massive complexity of India. In the same classroom, you'll have 6 languages, right? And none of the 6 languages are the same language that is the medium of instruction, right? So, most of you would be familiar with this, right? So, let's say if you're in Rajasthan, the medium of instruction is Hindi. Hindi is the language that you use. But the kids who come to your school, they don't speak Hindi. They'll speak Marwadi, Mewadi, Bhili, all kinds of stuff, right? So the public education system is dealing with enormous complexity, linguistic complexity, socio-economic complexity. You know that for a very large percentage of the kids who go to public schools in India, the midday meal, the lunch, is the only decent meal that they get. So extreme poverty, absolute extreme poverty, right? Also, which most people are unfamiliar with, is that the public school teachers, the government school teachers, what do they deal with? You usually have one teacher, you have 30, 40, 50 kids, and those 40, 50 kids are across 5 grades. So now you imagine, you have one teacher, 45, 50 kids across 5 grades. The same teacher is teaching math, language, and science, right? Now do that for 25, 30 years. You cannot think of a more challenging role in the world, right? So it's a very, very complex system. Of course, India has done some fabulous things over the past 25, 30 years. At least we have got all kids inside schools. If you go back to 1987, 88, only 45% kids were in school. Today, 100% kids are in primary school. I mean, of course, there's a drop-off after that. Now, I'm not going to go into greater detail. I just want to give you a flavor of the extreme complexity and challenges the public education system faces in India. Now, what the foundation does is the foundation is basically helping the public education system to improve. It does it by 3 things. One, we have 2,000 people, high expertise people, who are basically teacher educators, who work directly with teachers. What Earther does here, what Earther does here or Montclair State University does here, we have our own people of that kind, 2,000 of them, across 7 states in India, working in the most disadvantaged districts, right? So, anybody from Rajasthan? Nobody from Rajasthan? Madhya Pradesh? You live in Rajasthan, so you would be familiar. Barmer, right?
I studied in Barmer.
You studied in Barmer. So if you studied in Barmer, Barmer is this extreme desert district, right? So we have 70 people in Barmer, not in the city of Barmer, actually towns around Barmer. Chautan, you might know the names, huh? Yeah, Baitu, all these places, right? So we have these 2,000 odd teacher educators spread across the most difficult, the most disadvantaged parts of India, who are working directly with public school teachers to help support them, to develop their capacity, to form peer learning networks, to give them social support and so on, right? So that's one big part of our work. They work not only with school teachers, but also with school principals, other officials, and so on and so forth, right? And it's actually, I mean, that's the part of my works. I think, I forget who was asking me yesterday, right? That what do you like most of my role? And I keep telling people that I have the most privileged role in the entire world, because, I just get to meet such incredible people, do all this stuff that I do. But even within this privileges that I have, the greatest privilege is that I am able to spend a huge amount of my time in these places, right? Really seeing every day. Like last year, 105 of my days I spent in these places, seeing everyday public school teachers, who commute 1.5 hours one way, and commute in India in Barmer. We're not talking about these highways, right? This is a rickety bus, poor lady goes, whatever. So I see them. So that's a huge part of our work, right? And I don't say it like this, and if there's a whiff of satisfaction, it's not satisfaction. I'm just stating a fact to you right now. There's nothing in the entire world, forget about India, which is of this scale. There is no teacher support, professional development exercise in the entire world of this scale that's happening, right? The kind of stuff that we're doing. So the field work is a big part of the work that we do. The second part is that because we are the largest education organization in the country, we do all the governments try and work with us on policy and curriculum. So whether it's the central government in Delhi or the Karnataka government or Andhra Pradesh government or whatever, everybody works with us on policy and curriculum. We help them a lot. So that's second kind of work. Third is we run the Azim Premji University. So Azim Premji University is in Bangalore. The Azim Premji University is, let's say, basically focused on school education and other areas of human development. So we offer master's program in education, early childhood education, public health, governance, sustainability, policy, and so on and so forth, right? We offer also an outstanding undergraduate program, which again prepares kids to sort of grow up with social conscience. So the whole university, that university is not built with the idea that we will, there's some Ivy League university. That's not the idea. Of course, the education is very rigorous. But the idea is we must develop young people to go and contribute to society, right? So 3 things we do: field work, policy and curriculum, and we run the university, right? The university is right now in a leased campus. Next year, we're moving to our own campus. Then we'll increase the number of students from the current 1,300 to 8,000 roughly, right? So that's the education work that the foundation does. And then the stuff that I was saying that is complementary to education, where we are not an operating organization but a grant-making organization giving out money to other not-for-profits. There's some specific areas that we have chosen. One area is on particular gender issues, actually 3 gender issues. One, we are supporting not-for-profits that work on anti-trafficking, right? And that's actually, how do I put it, it's a scary bit of our work, truly scary, because if you're dealing with anti-trafficking, what you're dealing with is actually the mafias, right? So anti-trafficking. Second, we work with not-for-profits or support not-for-profits that try and help teenage girls of disadvantaged communities become economically self-independent. And third, we support not-for-profits that work on supporting women who are facing domestic violence, right? And domestic violence is an ugly reality in India, perhaps in all societies, right? And women who face that, they have nowhere to go, right? And certainly in India, you can imagine, some small town in UP somewhere, what does the woman do, right? So we were supporting not-for-profits that help them when events happen, help them in anticipation, provide legal support, and so on and so forth. So gender issues. Then we are supporting not-for-profits that are working on trying to help improve malnutrition in certain geographies. Then we are supporting not-for-profits that are working on reducing farm distress. You're familiar, right? You're familiar, acute farm distress, absolutely. Why are farmer suicides happening? Farmer suicides are happening because there's acute farm distress. So we're supporting not-for-profits that are working with what in India are called marginal farmers, meaning farmers with small landholdings, very small landholdings. We are also, and then we support not-for-profits which support a bunch of vulnerable groups. Vulnerable groups meaning people with physical and mental disabilities, homeless children, the urban homeless, right? So that we are supporting. So that's sort of the foundation's work, right? And basically the gift that Mr. Premji has given, which he's already given, and as you must have read or must have heard, he's publicly committed to giving away pretty much most of his wealth to the foundation, right? So, we are scaling up. We are scaling up, and our scaling up of the work, really the limit to our scaling up has really been our ability to recruit people of the required expertise, but then also get them to live in the places we operate. Since you've lived in Badmer, now you imagine 30 kilometers out of Badmer, who wants to go and live there, right? So it's very hard to get good people as is, and then to convince them to live there. And of course, there are very many good people. That's how we have 2,000 people. But getting that is sort of the rate limiting factor, right? Money is not the rate limiting factor for us. There's enough money that Mr. Premji has given us. So that's sort of the long story. And I'm going to stop now and maybe finish my coffee, and you can ask me what you want.
For them. So are they self-motivated for the mission, or you do something that gets or keeps them motivated? I think it'll be, especially in my business, we have 30% attrition rate. So if there's any learning I can do, that'll be useful.
See, without doubt, which is the people who work with us, right? They work for the purpose. They're not working here because of money at all, right? Not at all. So it's the purpose that is over everything else. And in fact, what is the purpose? Let's ask ourselves what the purpose is. What is our idea of education? Why are we working in education? We're not working in education because we think that education is a way by which kids will grow up to get jobs. That will happen. That's okay. That should happen. I'm not saying it should not happen. Sure. But we are working with education because we believe school education in particular, and that's something that he should have heard, school education in particular is the only organized social process to try and develop a more just society, a more equitable society, a more humane society. What does it mean operationally? What it means is, how do we demolish the walls of gender inequity that we have in our country? What do we do, right? What about caste, right? I mean, in India, if you're in Wipro, caste is not something that you know, right? But outside Wipro, I'm not saying outside Wipro in Badmer, outside Wipro in Bangalore, right? Or outside Wipro in Hyderabad, caste is a reality, right? And the disparities, the discriminations, the injustices that you people face every day because of caste is just unbelievable, right? So why are we working in education? It's because we want to change this society. I'm not talking about the United States, I'm talking about India. Now that is the purpose that fires our people, right? So therefore, money is, of course money is required to live, but that's what fires all these people that work with us. Now, I don't know about the 30% attrition, but my take on this whole affair is this, that, and I think it's true about organizations, right? Nobody works for the money. The question is, what is the purpose? And that purpose can't be, it has to be a meaningful purpose, right? And I think, I think business organizations across the world, not just Wipro or parts of Wipro, but business organizations across the world, they struggle with this fundamental matter. Because human beings, if you really want them to commit and do something, then they will do it for a purpose. They won't do it because they're getting a salary. If you don't give them a salary, they won't work for you, that's fine. But they'll do it for a purpose. So I think that's, to my mind, the most critical. I'll give you, because you asked me that question, I'll tell you something which is, to my mind, my source of energy every day. I described the teacher's role to you, and because he's from Badmer is this absolute desert district in Rajasthan. Very difficult place, very, very difficult place. Hard to get water, forget about everything else. Right? That's it. That's how difficult and how tough the terrain is. Now in that terrain, right, let's say on a Sunday afternoon, we will organize a workshop for teachers to, let's say, teach gravity better. So on a Sunday afternoon, teachers from 40-50 kilometers will show up, spending their own money, spending their own Sunday, leaving their families, stay the half day, spend own money on the food, and then go back. And they don't do this once in a year. This is repeated. This is every Sunday. So not the same the same teacher will not come every Sunday, but he or she might come alternate Sundays. We do the same thing in the evenings, after school hours, before dinner. Now, it's incredible that if we are operating roughly in 60 districts, 20, 25, 30% teachers show up like this, right? So just imagine this, and let me pull all your legs. If Rajan were to announce that this Sunday he is going to conduct this fabulous workshop that all of you guys can become better IT guys, right? Please spend your money, please pay for your lunch, please do this, please. How many guys are going to show up, right? He's being honest, zero he's saying. Nobody's going to show up. Why do government school teachers show up? And now I've seen this for like 15, 17 years across the country. Absolutely. It is unbelievable, totally unbelievable. And if you ask them, the answers are very simple. The answers are basically that, look, we want to do a better job. Why? Because these kids, their future is in our hands. What else do we do? Right? And I know I'm not able to do a good job, or I want to do a better job, but why are you wanting to do it? Because these kids' future is in our hands. That's why we do it, right? So, when you again, that's the issue of purpose, right? Not all teachers do it. 10% teachers are really bad. They won't show up at school, they won't do this or whatever. But that's, 10% people are bad everywhere, right? Where are they not bad? Let's forget about them. Is this 25-30% that really matter? So I don't have a simple. I think to be honest, the purpose, and the absolute clarity. Why are we here, right? Is, I think, the most important thing. And by the way, the teachers that I'm talking about, these 25-30% teachers, they are engaged with us in this manner Because again, they also know we are here only for that. We are not there to sell something. We are not there, those of you who are familiar with this, you'll be familiar, Rajan is fully familiar, right? That we don't talk about ourselves outside in India at all. Most people just don't know. They have no idea that we are so big, we do so much of work. They have no idea because we don't want to talk about us. We don't want to take the credit. We want to give the credit to the teachers who actually deserve the credit, right? So it's a tough question. Huh?
Not that I didn't know the answer. The problem is how to do it is, how to look for purpose in a corporate environment.
It's a very tough question.
And that is
the
struggle.
Well, I think it's an existential question for business organizations. I don't mean for Wipro. At the core of the design of the business organization, that's a basic question. Yeah.
I'm with Wipro for the last 2.5 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know much about Azim Premji Foundation activities, but I used to hear that they're doing a great job as far as education is concerned. So, on the other side, thank you. On the other side, if you look at Infosys Foundation, right, there is a lot of publicity about the work they do in the media. So I'm sure the foundation, Azim Premji Foundation, is doing much more elaborate work in different needed areas. But don't you think that we need to spend a little more on publicizing what is being done? In a way, to Rajan's question, it may help in building up the right image, getting the right candidates. If I'm interested in doing that kind of work, I didn't know about this. That's what.
Yeah, sure. So see, there are two. Let's separate two things. Huh? And this sort of because it's sort of complicated, does get mixed up. Let's separate two things. The Azim Premji Foundation is entirely separate from Wipro. Entirely separate from Wipro. It's very they're very tight corporate governance norms. The Azim Premji Foundation has ownership of Wipro. 3 people have common roles. Mr. Premji is the chairman of both entities. Rishad is a director on both entities. I am the CEO of the foundation and the chief SLB officer. For all 3 of our roles, and he will actually know this, we actually had to seek board permission. Public disclosure and board permission, right? So the foundation, the Azim Premji Foundation, is totally separate and distinct from Wipro. So that's point 1. Point 2, the Azim Premji Foundation, it's actually far more effective in what it's wanting to do, which is to try and help improve public education, if it does not seek publicity, right? Far more effective. Because at the foundation, we are not interested in glory. We are interested in trying to help the public education improve. The less credit we take, the less publicity that we have, the more, like the teachers that I talked about, the more they trust us, right? It's a very simple human psychology, right? Because it's very easy for me to go to Badmer and do some work and then get Times of India and NDTV and show them, and that's what everybody does, right? So, and it's not fair also, because if we have 2,000 people, the teachers are 250,000, right? They're 100 times our number. So whatever little work we are doing, the teachers are doing a lot more than that. So when people like us go there, parachute in, take publicity, go out, they hate it. And in fact, a lot of the work that we are able to do is because we are deliberately avoiding of publicity, right? Now that's the foundation stuff, which is the foundation will not seek publicity, will not do it because it's not right and it's not effective. Now when you come to Wipro, I have no hesitation at all that Wipro should and will talk about the Wipro work. Wipro is not doing the social work because we wanted to build our brand. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it, as I said to you, because we believe that any company must contribute to its community. But because we are doing all this stuff, if it helps build relationship, to tell a client how seriously we are committed, of course we must talk about it. Absolutely, right? So in client presentations or with with public officials here or wherever, in fact, the reason I was in DC past 3 days is because Kapil is taking me around trying to get me to talk to various administration people who should understand that what all does Wipro do, right? So what I'm in brief, I'm fully endorsing of what you're saying from a Wipro perspective, and Wipro should talk about this thing that Wipro does. And of course, there's also no harm at all in Wipro saying that, look, we are owned 33% by a foundation. That's true. And every dollar that we earn, 33 cents of that goes straight to the most disadvantaged people in the world, right? So that's also true. So there's no problem in Wipro saying that. The foundation won't seek publicity. Yeah, is it clear? Yeah.
I think I heard you that foundation is working with 7 states in India.
7 states in India.
We have got probably 31, right?
Sorry?
We have got 31 states in India.
Yeah.
So, is there any plan to expand to the remaining area, or any specific reason why you have chosen only the 7 states?
Yeah. Well, so there are three things. One is this, that the reason we are in 7 states and not in 31 is because we are not able to scale up, right? And like I said, it's not the money issue at all. It's a question of how do you get the people, how do you, get them to live where we are. So that's point one. Point two is this, that will we expand into other states? Not in the near future. When I say near future, in the next 5 to 7 years, we won't do it. 10 years later, would we expand into some other states? Perhaps yes, but not in the near future. I must also say that when I said 7 states, that 7-state comment was limited to the field work I was talking about, right? Let's say the support to the not-for-profits on gender issues or on this and that, that's across the country. So let's say we're supporting entirely across the country. In fact, the farm distress issue is really in some of the other states as well. So that is across the country. So that's second. Third is this, that why have we chosen the states that we have chosen? And the response to that is actually quite simple, which is this, that Karnataka is our home state, therefore we have to operate there. We don't have a choice. All the other states are Hindi-speaking states. And because in school education, the most important thing is language. I mean, if you can't speak the language, you can't work with teachers, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't develop curriculum. So therefore, we ended up choosing the Hindi-speaking states, because then you can build expertise with Hindi, right? So will we add Oriya or Marathi or Gujarati or Telugu or Tamil? We may do it, not right now. Again, maybe 7-10 years later. But I hope I'm clear that the grant-making support that we do to the other organizations, that's entirely across the country.
How much is being spent from the foundation? So just to get a view of the overall.
We don't report that. Okay, we don't report that. So I will not tell you the exact number, but you take an estimate in this manner, right? You can take it in. Okay, one number we report. The Azim Premji University spend is reported outside, right? So because that's a public institution, so it's reported outside. So let's say I think on the Azim Premji University, the last year expenditure was roughly, I think about 100 crores, right? Roughly. But you think of it this way, that our organization, its work is designed such that when we have, let's say, roughly a $16 billion endowment, so let's take, let me use Indian numbers for a bit, let me not use dollars. So if we have about 100,000, 120,000 crores as an endowment, we think of 6% return. So the mandate that my endowment team has is to get 6% return off the endowment, 6% post-tax return. So that's roughly 6,000 crores. So when we are fully scaled up, we should be spending something of that nature, right? Per annum. So which is why, it does make us by far the largest such organization in that part of the world, right? It's a lot of money, huge amount of money. Yeah, roughly. Yeah. It should be at that. Right now we've not scaled up fully, so we're not spending that much, but that's what we should be spending.
Thanks. If your issue's been scaling up and getting people in the right places who have that skill set, I'm sure you might have, but have you thought of partnering with firms like Udacity who provide online education services or, automating some of this work? Or maybe other ways of, universities who provide online education, right? So you can have, instead of people going and working, maybe have a setup where people come and just switch on a TV screen, and you can be in Bangalore and delivering that information out to teachers? Instead of physically being present in a village that is so far off.
The short answer to that thing is it doesn't work. It doesn't work because of one of it is what you said, which is a practical reason, which is that infrastructure doesn't work, etc., etc. But it doesn't work because of it doesn't work fundamentally, right? All the hype about MOOCs, what's happened? Right? It's failed, right? Education, and in particular, education of kids. Adult learning is very different from learning of kids. IT doesn't work. So you guys are all IT guys and you won't like this, but the use of IT, if at all, is overhyped, right? If you guys are interested, the most succinct summary of this particular matter is a book called Geek, G-E-K, Geek Heresy. And the subtitle says it all, which is, the subtitle is Confessions of a Recovering Technoholic. Okay. This guy actually, he was, and some of you will know it, he will know it for sure. He was the guy who set up the Microsoft R&D center in Bangalore. So the Japanese guy, Kentaro Toyama, he's actually now a professor at UOM, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So he set it up, and he was, he came with this zealous idea that somehow technology will help with health, education, etc. And he realized eventually how limited an effect of technology is there. So short answer is, one, practically because of infrastructure issues, these things don't work at all. Right? I mean, there's no power, there's no electricity, there's no bandwidth, nothing works. Right? So that's one part of it. The other part, which is a far more core kind of a thing, is that technology is not good for school kids from an education perspective. You must have famously heard this, and people keep repeating this all the time, that when Jobs was alive, right, he would not let his kids use iPads. No technology, go to good teachers. Right? So both those reasons. Yeah.
Good business reason, or good reason why you are, like to maintain anonymity. But I think some of the impact that you're making, doing all this good work, I think it kind of makes sense to perhaps share some of that. Like, as a result of this effort in the last 18 months or 24 months, or maybe last 5 years, it resulted in, like you talked about anti-trafficking, you talked about domestic violence. This is a very important issue, and I think it affects everybody, regardless of where you live, right? So I think those stats could be really, really helpful, and I think it could get a lot of people excited. And one of the things I think to I guess, piggyback on Rajan's comment, and I think inside all of most how do I say, a capitalist, there is this philanthropist. We want to do something, right? And I think sometimes those stats could get people excited. So, I mean, I know that you don't share the numbers on a financial standpoint, but do you share stats like success stories?
Yeah, we can do it, but look, the thing is this, that if I may say it in this manner, I mean, like, if Wipro wants to do it, Wipro is welcome to doing it. We won't do it. We won't do it because that's not we don't want to talk about it. So if Wipro wants to say that, well, we are owned 33% by a foundation which does all this kind of stuff, by all means, absolutely, right? But we won't do it. But that's a very narrow way of responding to your question. Let me respond slightly more broadly, which is this, that it's pretty much similar to what I responded to him, that in every way, and whichever level of detail, it's like you're saying that when you're saying anti-trafficking, what happened, or for example, let me give you another fascinating example, which the estimate is that roughly 250,000 kids every year get lost in platforms, train platforms. When I say lost, means some of them are deliberately trafficked, some of them actually get lost, some of them run away from home, but their transition points are the station platforms. So we have now systematically supported not-for-profits, which are covering 30 of the major junctions in India, and all that they do is that they keep 24-hour watch with trained people, and they're looking out for kids either who are alone or who are with adults in some suspicious, right? And then they'll go and ask and figure it out, and they'll basically rescue the kids. And they rescue the kids, and then there's a home where they'll be put. Once they're put in the home for a week, 10 days, they'll be there. In 70-80% of the cases, their homes are identified and the kids are sent back, right? So there are wonderful things like this. What I'm saying is, my basic response is, yes, indeed. I mean, for sure, if Wipro, either with a client or internally, and by the way, why am I doing this here? Internally, if it is useful in any way, for sure we should do it. Absolutely, right? No problem. Yeah.
Can I add? The point is actually we don't have the data points of what is being.
Yeah. See, you know what? At the level that I have talked of, even if you repeat this is sufficient, right? One doesn't really need anything more than this. I mean, we've been sitting here now for almost 2 hours, or an hour and 40 minutes, something like that, right? So you won't get the opportunity. All you need to know from a perspective of a client meeting or whatever you might have is really just detail that I have talked about. And if you're really interested in even greater detail, Kapil is always there. You can reach out to Kapil. Kapil can get you more details. Yeah.
And I was going to add to your point about awareness. We are going to work on an internal awareness campaign. One of the things that I think connects all of us is this love for community and all the things that we do. So if you look at what our colleagues are doing in Indianapolis compared to what we're doing here in East Brunswick, to what we're going to be going to Brooklyn tomorrow to meet with Rajan's team, everybody's doing different things. But the one thing that connects all of us as being Wiproites is commitment to community. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit more about. We'll start sharing those stories internally. Externally, I agree with Anurag in the sense that if you talk too much about it, it doesn't seem as genuine. And I've seen that firsthand. Somebody mentioned emphasis. In Washington, we laugh and joke about emphasis because emphasis beats its chest but hasn't produced much, at least in our opinion. So what I love about Wipro more than anything else, we do it first, talk later. And that is what Anurag and I are doing. It's what he's doing. We've met with so many policy people. We just met with the mayor of Hoboken today. We didn't offer him money. What we offered him was guidance. How do we help Hoboken? Because I don't know if you know, Hoboken has the first Sikh American mayor. We went to him and said, how do we make your school system better? And that's what we're doing. We'd rather do it quietly, do it substantively. This fellowship program that Anurag and Santosh had started is incredible. We've had teachers crying, thanking Wipro for doing this program. I think that's the kind of credibility we want. That's the kind of promotion we want. We want the teachers to do it for us, be happy with it. And, we want to grow this program, and we're going to work on that externally. But internally, we're doing it, little by little. But we'd rather do first, talk later.
I just want to end the note on just one small comment. Anurag gave me a lot of credit for starting off on the school system, but I've been to some of those events, and it's incredible. The moment when people come to you and say they express the gratitude is incredible feeling. So I would welcome all of you to join. And I think being sort of headquarters of the US, I find that our participation is actually lagging compared to many of the states where we are doing some really good work. So there is a lot that we can all do in this city, and I was hoping that we would have a much fuller room than what we saw today. But nevertheless, all of you made it. Thank you very much. Thanks to Anurag for spending the time. I hope it was very useful. I get goosebumps every time I hear him. So I hope you had a lot to carry. Thank you once again.
Thanks.
And
Thank you,
we
sir.
have some snacks. We have more snacks than we need. So help yourself. Maybe Beena didn't announce that there is snacks. Otherwise, we would have more people.
I would have given a purpose.
Everybody did notice that it almost seemed as though Amrish clapped only for the snacks.
Because he knows that. Listening at first I heard you and it was super.
Just one small anecdote, because we heard so many of them, and I'll end this. when I remembered this. So me and Saurabh Govil once attended a employee session, and it was in Petco. I remember it's in San Diego, and that was the year when most accounts had got 0 QPLC for like continuously 3 or 4 quarters. So I purposely took Saurabh to all those meetings, and they started off the meeting. The first thing, when we first entered, we arrived. The client partner took us in, and there was a hall like this. There was a head table with 3 chairs, and we started. The moment first question was, "Why are you guys here?" Right? HR guys, you don't do anything. You here and nothing happens, and then they went on a rampage saying this policy is bullshit and this and that, and this guy was really shaken. The account manager, now head of HR is here, and these guys are ripping them apart, kind of stuff. So after about an hour of this multiple questions, one of the questions was on we are having to work some 20 hours a day or 10 hours a day, and we are slogging. There is no recognition of our extra time and some stuff like that. So I deferred that question to Andy, who was the client partner. Andy, I said, this looks like a staffing issue. Why don't you answer? So Andy then clears his throat, has a gulp of water, and then starts, "Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, usually we have the meeting was around 10 o'clock in the morning, right? Because we have our schedule, etc. Usually we have these meetings in the afternoon or evening, when we have some snacks. Unfortunately, today we couldn't arrange it. The mood is light when you have snacks." So with that, we can all have some snacks.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you once again.